How are you?
I'm so good. How are you?
I'm so good. I feel like when you first came on Q, pretty early on, you hadn't won Polaris or anything like that yet.
No.
I think we've been talking for a while now.
Yeah, like 2018 maybe?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Nice to see you.
Nice to see you again.
Why are we at the Long McQuade in Brampton, Ontario?
We are here because this is a place that means a lot to me. I worked here for 4 years, almost 4 years, music retail. I spent a lot of time honing my craft here when I probably should have been focusing on selling things to people. But
Is that true?
I mean, I was doing my job, but I was always writing lyrics in the back of my mind.
What was your job here?
Yeah, I worked here in rentals, in PA and DJ and lights. And I just helped the customers get what they needed and trade passionate stories. And that wasn't in the job description, but I did it.
What do you mean? What passionate stories did you trade with who?
When customers come in and they're like, well, here's what I'd like to do. And then I spend 2 hours talking to them about how to achieve it and the technical aspect of it and how, just going way deeper than maybe I should have. But a lot of fond memories have been shared here with the staff, the management, other coworkers, and also the customers.
When you were here, were you in the back of your mind thinking, someday I won't be here? Like someday I may not be working here. Someday I might be doing the thing I'm doing now.
Yeah, the entire time that I was working here, well, not the entire time, but as I was working here, I also started to develop more kind of like out of job, like work experiences, touring with the sorority, the rap group I used to be in, and also just touring as Haviah as well. And these things were all happening simultaneously. So there were like scheduling conflicts at times. I had to try to figure out everything. I worked here full time. So it was a balance, and it got to a point where I knew that I wouldn't be working here forever. And then it got to the point where we did have to part ways. But the relationship with the team here remains because, I'm very loyal to this place. And I mean, look at all the guitars on the wall. This is awesome. Like there's nothing like it.
It's a beautiful place. And I understand the gratitude and the love for the people who work here.
Absolutely.
And I bet it was cool when things got to the point that you could leave.
It was pretty exciting. That was just before the Polaris, actually. And it was, when I put out my project, 13th Floor, that had won that, it was just too much. There was no way to kind of balance it all, and someone would not be the priority to the degree that they needed to be. And at that time, I knew Haviah Mighty had to be that priority, so I made that pivot.
You went in one day?
Well, the thing is, I was really good about it, though. Like, I was talking to my manager in advance. We had a whole plan. They knew months ahead which day I would be leaving. We worked together, like, collectively on that. So that was really, like, I was grateful for that as well.
I bet they're proud of you.
I think so. I think so.
Yeah?
Yeah, they always show love when I come to the store. They have, like, a poster in rentals where I spend a lot of my time. It's like a little shrine with my name on it. It's my picture on it, a little magazine cover. They make me feel happy about what I'm doing.
You mentioned the Polaris thing, right? Because, and as you mentioned, like you already had fans before that. We had been hearing about you. Like you were making music before Polaris, before the Prison Prize. But then you win those things. There's a lot of momentum behind you, and then there's a big tour planned, and then you were going to go to South by Southwest and all that kind of stuff, and then the pandemic happens, and I think early on in the pandemic, you and I talked. I think it was like April or May. And you were doing videos out of your house. You were the first person I knew who had a nice setup.
Oh, that means a lot.
You know what I mean?
Thanks to Long McQuade.
This is bad. I'm just trying to get the same discount, so that's all that's going on.
I'll talk to them.
How, when everything is happening so quickly as it did when you won Polaris and Prism and the Junos and just all that support you got. And then the pandemic happens, it slows everybody down, but you've somehow managed to keep the momentum going. How do you do that?
I quit my job, so there was no choice but to keep doing it. But at the same time, like, there's nothing that can prevent me from making music. And like, I was lucky to have invested in, a high quality microphone right before the pandemic. So it was like, I have a home studio in my house. So the only pivot that I could think of that was logical was, we'll just keep making music that you can make in your house. It's the only thing that there isn't a restriction on right now that will kind of keep me going. And then I started getting virtual performance opportunities. And, with the knowledge that I had, from school, going to Fanshawe College for music, working here in music. I actually know a little bit of the kind of the technical aspect behind what it takes to make stuff sound good. And, you know, I have some friends I could call here at the store, and it was like, you know, what do I need to kind of get that high quality audio into my phone and kind of keep that experience going? And of course, like you'd mentioned, there were fans who already were tapped in and, you know, invested and wanted to know what was going on. And it's like, nothing going on was never an option for me, especially at that time. So I just pivoted to the only thing I've ever known beyond like the shows and everything, which was just like making songs in my basement. Like that's how I started. So I just kind of went back to the roots.
It was scary to have everything that you had worked for up to that point kind of stop?
Oh, definitely, yeah. Because I had the most momentum that I'd ever had in my career, fresh off of the Polaris. And there wasn't even a year to kind of work that momentum to, you know, I just started playing shows in the States. Actually, I was in the States when I found out that we were going into a state of lockdown.
Where were you?
I was in LA. And it was my first performance. I was in New York. It was like a little mini tour that we'd planned. And it was, you know, off of the strength of everything that I'd done in 2019. So 2020 started off really well. I actually played with the Arkells in January, and then I went to the States. And yeah, I was in New York, San Francisco, Montreal. We went back to LA. And I was in LA when I found out about this thing. I hadn't heard about COVID prior, so I was like, oh, there's no way the world's gonna be locked down. It just wasn't a concept I could fathom. And when I came back home, lockdown, like nothing, like it was over. And I knew it was real when South by Southwest got canceled, because I had, you know, that's obviously a place that artists always want to play, and I had 4 or 5 performances lined up. I was really excited for that.
It's one thing to have a built career, and you had a couple of records out, and then the pandemic happens and whatever, you're off the road. It's another thing to be kind of starting out, no, you know, I'm just getting going anyway, so the pandemic happens, I gotta wait a little while. What is the experience like of having everything kind of happen at once? The momentum is really there, like you said, more than ever, and then it all just has to stop. Like it must be scary. You must be wondering, will this stick around?
Yeah, it's interesting. I'm lucky enough that I never thought that.
Okay.
I never actually thought, will this stick around? I just thought, how am I gonna pivot? Like I knew I was going to, and I actually never doubted that it was possible, but I just didn't know how. And I think the other thing too is the uncertainty of like, when will things kind of come back? I'm like, things will adjust, and if I'm manifesting positive things, whatever direction that the world moves in, I will kind of access those positive things. But how will I do that? How will I stay relevant if I'm not releasing music? There's obviously a huge fear of releasing music in a time where you can't tour it or market it or travel to other markets to like showcase it. So that was a big fear. And I also saw a lot of musicians who spent, you know, all of 2019 working and refining a project, and they drop it and then they can't tour it. I saw kind of how devastating that was for a lot of musicians. So I just didn't want to do that. So I was like, that's the way I was gonna do it. That's literally what we planned this year. So for me, it was just, what is the pivot? Like, what are we gonna do instead? And making music was literally the only answer that I had.
Where does that come from in you? That sort of resilience to say like, I'm not gonna be too scared of it, I'm just gonna work on it. Where does that come from in you?
I don't know. I feel like I've always been like that. I don't feel like anything is owed to you. And I feel like if you don't manifest it, unless you get lucky, it's not gonna happen. But I also think like luck is like hard work versus like in a combination of timing and whatnot. But
yeah.
you, again, if in order to create the reality that you want, you have to manifest it. And I think I've always felt that way. So I've never felt like the path that you think it is definitely gonna be the path that it is.
Why have you always felt that way? Does it come from your family? Does it come from? I know it's a big question. But
It is a big
curious,
question.
You know?
I think that I've always looked at myself as an underdog. I've always seen myself as an underdog. I'm a Black female from Canada. I've always, been sort of dismissed in a lot of situations where I want to occupy space. Maybe people don't make eye contact, or maybe you're viewed a certain way in certain settings and you can feel that energy. So I've always kind of viewed myself as an underdog. So I always felt like hard work is like the way that I'm gonna overcome the adversities that I face. And, the pandemic wasn't something that was specific to me. Like, this was happening to everybody. So, it was just it's like a life thing that you can't avoid. Like, you can't avoid the adversities that exist now, regardless of like how unfair white supremacy, racism, these sorts of things, these concepts, these they're not concepts, they're things that exist. But just because something is unfair doesn't mean it doesn't exist. So it's like, I don't know, it's just kind of like you just kind of have to pivot. And I feel like I've always had that mindset, maybe because I had to. Yeah. I'm not sure.
I mean, what you said makes sense to me. You know, you have it because you have to. There's no other option.
Right.
What did winning the Polaris give you?
Validation, for sure. It was a project written from the perspective of a Black woman in Canada whose reality is often dismissed by her counterparts. So obviously I'm not thinking that my counterparts are gonna like validate this album. It's like the theme is the opposition and the relativeness of the 13th floor, and that being obviously something that exists, but we just kind of have this understanding in the northern world that the 13th floor is removed from buildings. It's kind of, that's the parallel of dismissing something that is real because we don't understand it. So to have a project like that, where I used to be very scared of writing about certain topics, talking about, things that involve, discrepancies with my community and the police or racial topics, just anything that's gonna be controversial. I did kind of avoid that when I was younger, and I just tried to make fun music. But I would always have these conversations with friends and with family. And so when I finally was brave enough to put it into the music, I didn't expect that to be the first time that I felt kind of the real reward of my music. And it's interesting that honest point of view was what was received the most positively by the audience.
So 2 questions on that. One is, what changed that made you feel comfortable enough to start talking about that stuff?
What changed? I think I became more confident in myself. I had more experiences. I went to school in London, Ontario, and saw what it was like in like a different region with even less people that looked like me than Toronto and Brampton, and still doing music in that facet, right? And just like learning to pivot, but just getting confident with what it is that I knew, what it is that I'd experienced, and also how to discuss those topics. I think that was really important, like songs like 13 on the project 13th Floor. It's like I was able to take facts that I had learned and take the emotions that obviously exist out of these discussions so I could have these discussions without draining myself. And I think that in doing that, I was able to put it into the music and have that be kind of an entity that was educational, informative, and actually empowering more than it was hurtful to have to reflect on those things. That's where that, strength came from. And then to be validated for that, with the Polaris, recognizing that project as the best album of that year amongst amazing musicians as well. I think it was people always say, authenticity sells, like people, that's the thing that people want the most. And sometimes it's like, oh yeah, but like you look at the music industry and there's a lot of contrived things and things are very gimmicky and curated.
A lot of fake authenticity.
A lot of fake authenticity,
yeah.
Exactly. So you don't know if that really exists, and I wasn't sure, but I think it can, real authenticity can kind of break through, and that was a moment where it did for me.
And the reason we're here today is to talk about Stock Exchange, because it's nominated for a Juno. It's a mixtape. It's a compilation of tracks that you made over the course of the pandemic. And I remember having you on to talk about it when it first came out. And you had this quote by Philip Fisher: "The stock market is filled with individuals who know the price of everything but the value of nothing." Talk to me a little bit about that.
Yeah, so initially the mixtape Stock Exchange was not a mixtape or a project or anything. It was just songs that I put out. And it started off as one song, a second song, a third song. I was putting out a song every month starting November of 2020. And it was interesting because the way that the songs were being received each month and the disparity between that on different social media platforms, and also the effect on my mental state, that actually became the theme of the not initially project, and it became a project. The amount of comments, streams, likes, shares that a song got, it was really interesting because it would determine how well I did that month and how people received me that month, but it would also shift drastically when I would release the next thing. If I put out a music video to support that song, then it would, do better, and it would almost have like more appeal, and it would almost have more stock. There would be more comments to support that, which would then in turn sometimes generate more streams, but then maybe it wouldn't because you divide those streams. It was this very interesting time where there was no validation of what my music meant to people other than digital validation. And so these were people who'd maybe never heard of me before or didn't have that real world experience of meeting the person. They're actually just somewhat perceiving this thing based on how it's doing on the internet. So if you find a song and it has 10,000 plays and you really like it, but it only has 10,000 plays, it like sometimes like impacts how impressive this thing is to you. And we see this, of course, viral moments, it cycles, right? And the more viral it is, the more viral it goes because people see the value in checking it out because many other people have checked it out. And so that was a really difficult concept for me to have to deal with in that part of my career.
Difficult how?
Difficult because it would change not only how I would try to strategize the next song release, because it was month to month to month.
Yeah, practically.
But also internally. So like internally, like if I wasn't doing well, I would question. There were never like full out moments of, I'm gonna give up on music, but there are those times where you're like, am I actually good? Do people like me for the right reasons? Do they actually even like me? Or you get like a comment that's really not positive, maybe a hater or a troll on YouTube, and like that is resounding for the day. And it's like, you can validate that nasty comment because you don't have a lot of streams on your last song, right? So it's like, if you were doing well that month, maybe it would be harder for those things to penetrate, or maybe you wake up and eat breakfast because you feel great, and, I'll do my workout, but then like the next month, you don't get those streams, or even like you drop the song and the video uploaded wrong and you have to re-upload it, and then you don't get as many comments. Like all these little nuances change the value of something that shouldn't be based on those things.
Yeah, I know exactly what you mean. Like I mean, I don't know exactly what you mean, but I know what you mean.
Yeah.
Like if I do something on this and it doesn't do, like the YouTube video gets like, X number, or like the podcast doesn't do as well, like I have no control over that.
Exactly.
I have no control over that. That could happen for a number of different reasons that have to do with like algorithms that I have nothing to do with.
Right.
Like it messes me up.
Yeah.
Like that's insane to me. Like that my self-worth is beholden to these numbers. You know what I mean?
And we live in that. And like the pandemic was, the hardest time personally for me for that, but we live in that on your end. It's the same thing. It's like, it reflects on it shouldn't. That was the concept of the album and why I ended up going with the topic stock exchange, is that it was reflecting on my value as a person, like internally. So like if I wasn't doing well that month, I wouldn't feel as good about myself.
Like mentally, you were like not doing well?
Yeah, definitely. I like health decisions, like literally just like eating enough meals a day like wouldn't happen if I didn't feel good about my output or my art. Or even if I felt good about it, that could be pivoted by maybe somebody else on the internet not feeling good about it. Now I don't feel good about it either.
Yeah. What do you get? I mean, how do you come out of that? Where do you, like, you seem to have gotten somewhere where you're getting your value from somewhere else rather than streams and tweets.
Yeah, definitely. I think the biggest thing is that I had to recognize what was happening and the effect that the pandemic was having on me musically and artistically and creatively. I had to realize that I was allowing my mood to fluctuate, and I'd have conversations with my team, my family, my friends. Luckily, my family is really close with me. My team is really close with me too, so they would verbally validate me if I would speak about these things with them. They would remind me, listen, like that is not true. Whatever it is that you're thinking right now or feeling based on this the two people commenting or whatever, or this song not streaming as well as you think it would, it's not the all-encompassing story. And what you're feeling right now is a valid emotion, but don't let it overtake the other emotions of knowing you're great, knowing that you can go in this, your basement and make a great song and people will like that. And so they would remind me, and once you start to think better, then you do better. And I think coming up with the concept of the album was actually the validation that I needed to recognize that these songs were almost stocks and bonds that were being released, and then the market was investing in it based on all of these things. Like the stock market, this is how it functions. It's a company may be doing well, not necessarily because it's actually more valuable than another one, but because there's that perception of value. And perception is huge. And perception can be based on so many things. It could, you could be a good rapper, but if you don't have the right outfit on, I might not perceive that you're that good. But then if you have the right t-shirt and I know that brand, all of a sudden your stock goes up, right? So recognizing those things helped me not only strategize, but also understand that those lapses of judgment, or not even lapses of judgment, but perception from alternate parties or whatever, it means nothing about me, my music, me as a person, and it's gonna get worse. If you want to make music and share it publicly and have this mass amount of people be able to receive it, some of them are gonna be like, this is shit. This is garbage, and I don't like it. And that process of making those songs on the stock exchange also trained me to hopefully be better at that when that time comes, right?
Yeah, it sounds like you got somewhere with it.
I think so.
I'm a little jealous of you.
I think you got it too.
Yeah, I know. I got a little bit there myself. Yeah. But it sounds like you figured out that it needs to come from within, you know?
Absolutely.
Or from people you love and trust. Like, I love your brother's involved in this record, right?
Yes.
Tell me a little bit about that,
Yeah.
for people who don't know.
Prince 2 times, Mighty Prince. He goes by 2 different names, but my little brother is a producer, and he's dope. Like, not a producer because he's my brother, and I'm like, let me give you an opportunity. Like, he started making these beats, and I'm like, these are so amazing. Like, can I please, like, send me the stems? So, you know, he's produced a couple songs on the record, like Atlantic, co-produced on Occasion. I can't think of all of them right now, but yeah, he's
not here.
I know.
And don't worry about it. I'm not going to quiz you. Like, he's not going to pop out and go, you forgot to mention. No, he's not going to do anything like that.
I've worked with him on both 13th Floor and Stock Exchange. I'm sure on the next project that I'm already working on, you know, he's going to have some, you know, a little razzle-dazzle on there too. But he's great. It's really nice to have an in-house producer because you can kind of just be like, hey, could you do that thing today?
I've never heard anyone refer to their brother as an in-house producer before. That's
kinda
really great. I love it.
He can just come to my bedroom and connect his laptop. It's really, you know, it's primal.
Your sister's also involved. I met your sister when she came in for Q one time, right?
Yes, Haviah Mighty, I think.
Yeah. Like, it must be meaningful to you to have family, especially at this time when we're all seeking validation from outside places.
Oh, yeah.
It must be so meaningful to have family at the core of what you're doing.
Oh, yeah. Like, Omega keeps me so grounded, and you know, as a musician herself, who is an incredible performer, incredible artist. She's very talented, but she's also like that family member that just like she's so busy with her own stuff, but always makes herself available to me. Like today, I was like, I'll do my own makeup. I really am asking you for a lot. Like I'm gonna do my own, because she also does my makeup. She does choreo for me sometimes. She will come on stage and join me. And before I was performing on stages, she was performing on stages and giving me my first opportunities. And I was all stiff and nervous. And I've come a long way, largely because I've just watched her and lived vicariously through her and learned, oh, she's really confident and kind of has the same adversities I face. I could do it too.
That's so meaningful.
Yeah.
One of the tracks on the record, if I'm not mistaken, was inspired by a protest you went to, which if I'm not mistaken, is the first protest you went to?
The first, yeah.
Tell me about the song.
The song Protest, it was 2020, so what was happening in 2020? Well, there were a lot of protests, and it was a time where the adversities that different communities face were being brought to light more than I'd ever seen in my life. And it was pretty empowering to see people occupying space in the way that they were. I was talking about these things, like I'd put out the project 13th Floor in 2019, but it wasn't occupying space the same way, and there wasn't this reception to topics like that, the same way that it was in 2020. And I don't know if it was because we were all kind of stuck on the internet at home, forced to have a perception or opinion on these things that were happening. Mm-hmm. We're not as distracted. Mm-hmm. But for me, I saw there were a lot of people that either knew what was going on or didn't know that was going on, that were like, I would like to learn a little bit more. I'd like to participate in this thing. And as somebody who's invested in these topics, I always worried about going to protests because I'm Black. So I feel like I could look like the problem. And I have seen in history Black and white videos of how people are treated when they do demonstrate how they feel about the adversities that they face. Yeah. So I think I was always kind of scared about actually going to a protest, and because they weren't happening, it wasn't something that I didn't target that fear until the time where it was actually happening. They were accessible, I was being invited, and I was like, I need to be a part of something like this. I can't make music like this and not actually see what the community feels and thinks, and actually just add my body, my energy, and my voice to this. So the first protest I went to, I think, was in Hamilton. And I just walked with everybody. I think I went alone. I just felt the energy of the space.
What did that feel like?
It felt very empowering. It felt like community. And I think what was beautiful about the protest that I went to was there were people of all different colors with signs that were speaking to adversities that they might not face. And I thought that was very empowering. There are a lot of people with Black Lives Matter written on, posters and things, and they weren't Black people. And I'd never seen that in my entire life. I'd never seen people kind of putting them, not themselves on a limb, but just kind of using their voice in a way like that and spending, hours letting the people walking by and driving by know this is an important matter. Please consider this. I just think protesting I think it's really powerful. I think it oftentimes can teach you that there is something going on somewhere in the world that is affecting a large number of people or even a small number of people. And those people want to bring awareness to that so that hurt or that pain can change or stop. And I think that there's a lot of power in that.
How do you channel that into a song?
Oh, it's like, there's no step process to channeling that into a song. I think it just happens. Like, there's a song, I mentioned it before, that my song 13, it talks about the 13th Amendment in the US and how that kind of structures the ideologies that Black people deal with and face and the adversities we face as well. It's a very powerful song. It's like a history lesson in 3 minutes.
It's an unbelievable song.
Thank you very much.
Yeah.
But I feel like that song didn't come from me. I had that production, and initially I started off by writing an empowering letter to somebody that I know in jail, or knew. They got out now, that's great. But they were in jail, and I kind of felt like society is designed for you to end up here. So it was like I kind of wrote a song designed to be written to that person so they'd come out and feel empowered. But I just didn't think it was that strong of a song. And I knew, okay, that's kind of the theme, but I just felt like I was forcing the song, right? And I'd written 2, 3, 4 different versions of this song. And I was like, it's not right. And one day, I was just doing my YouTube thing, going down the rabbit hole of learning about random things, and I stumbled upon the 13th Amendment in layman's terms. And I was pretty shocked, but also not shocked, because it answered a lot of questions. I'd have a lot of discussions that understanding what the 13th Amendment is. Well, slavery is abolished in 1865, but involuntary servitude is abolished now, unless you're a criminal.
Yeah.
And I've always kind of said the jail system looks so similar to what slavery was.
Yeah.
But I couldn't click it like the Lego blocks. I couldn't, put it together, and the 13th Amendment did that for me. So when I wrote that song, it didn't feel like it was my opinion.
Yeah.
As a Black woman, I'm sure some audience members might be like, of course she's gonna feel that way about this topic.
Right.
And it invalidates the song.
Yeah.
But what made it so valid to me is this is not my opinion.
Yeah.
These are facts that I learned. You can look this up. I'm not making anything up. This isn't about me. And that song, I ended up writing that version that we hear, the studio version, in 15 minutes, just from the research that kind of made all these things just click for me. And it answered so many questions that I'd had, and I was like, I know other people have these questions. So let me try to answer it through not my thinking, but from my reading, from my research.
And is that how protest goes too? Are you coming back from the energy you felt at that protest? You were telling me that they're looking around and seeing all kinds of different people holding up signs that say Black Lives Matter. This is very meaningful to you. Your first ever protest, you felt sort of not scared, but you felt understandably uncomfortable to go to one in the past, given the consequences that you could face. You come home and you write this song. Does it come from that same place? You're not sure where that comes from?
Protest came from a different place. Protest actually came from seeing so many people understand what I think about this, and then going home and then seeing so many people feel the exact opposite. The negative comments on the protests online and people being like, these people are blocking the road and I gotta get to work. Or just people that just didn't get it at all.
Yeah.
And I was surprised by seeing how many people did, but then I wasn't as surprised to see, there's still so many people that don't get this. And protest actually came from trying to identify to me why protesting is something that is valuable. So when in the chorus I say, I got the over-the-shoulder look pat down, it's the fear that I walk with every single day that other people just wouldn't understand or wouldn't validate. Why is that? Where is there that fear? It's well, when I go somewhere, I feel like the police are looking for me because history shows that they have been. And so even if I'm not doing anything wrong, if I'm driving and a police officer is behind me, I think that would maybe affect everybody, but the degree that it's going to affect me, or even the degree that it's going to affect my brother, for example, it's different because what could happen on the other end from perceived values, back to stock exchange now, the perceived value of that person can change how that interaction goes. Yeah. If there's biases that particular police officer has, that can affect how that interaction goes. And so those fears also add to the importance of talking about what it means to be Black in this country. And 2020, there was a lot of clash between law enforcement and my community and other POC communities as well. And there were so many people that are just I just don't get why we were talking about this still. And it's just well, here's why. From my perspective as a Black Canadian girl, this is why we're talking about it. Like, and so even in the verse, it's like I say you need to broaden your scope. Picture you got darker skin and broaden your nose. This is the world this is not a world that you can see, so I'm trying to help you see it. I be sick when I be thinking about the trauma we know. This shit is scripted. Watch the drama unfold. You hear them sirens, that's the sound of the law. They say be silent with their hands on your jaw. They say you violent, but they act like they God. They want submission. They'll let your ass get ravaged by the dogs, but there's a system. My black ass just don't fit in. Oh, I get it. You know, I can understand why someone wouldn't feel that who doesn't live that. And then, again, with the research, I love researching and reading and stuff like that.
Yeah.
When I go into the second part of that verse, I talk about some of the origins of racism in this country, because in 13, I'm talking about the 13th Amendment, that's US driven. Yeah, so that's the US Constitution. So in this song, I wanted to reflect and focus on kind of what was happening here, because I was inspired by protesting here in this country. So I went into the second verse with, it's a race game, and this game is hopeless. From the 60s, they displaced the Scotians. Back then, they made slave patrol and night watches. They became the roaches. Immigrants said, this gate is open. Did a whole mile, an inch came the closest. So I walk with this strange emotion in my head, because this braid is ropes and chains. So it's definitely poetic. You kind of have to like hear it a few times to really get what I'm coming from. But it's like, as somebody with this hair, this crown, this experience, this visual, all of these things, it's like, this is not something that exists as of today. Like, if you look back to some of the earliest slaves here in this country and the things that happened in Nova Scotia, like if you go there and understand the history or see the history or just even do a little bit of reading, like you'll understand that even a lot of the migration that has happened as a result of the way that Black people were not accepted. You know, their homes were destroyed. You know, their ability, their possible, you know, growing their family, their community was completely destroyed and then dispersed. And then it's like, you got to restart, and then you got to restart, and then you got to restart. So it's, I talk to a lot of people who from my own community don't understand that, and it makes sense because there was this dispersing and then this restarting, and you lose history when all of that happens. And I just think it's so empowering to remind ourselves of that history so that we know where we came from. And that brings back the strength that sometimes, you know, when you're in school, it's like when you learn about slavery, it's like, it's not really empowering. It's hard to feel like, wow, my people are awesome. When you're like, well, they were slaves for 400 years and, you know, they were controlled in these ways. It's hard to feel like you came from something great. But that's only a part of that history. So I feel to talk about the parts of the history that aren't discussed is a reminder of the full story. And then it's easier to feel that empowerment because it's there in the history. It exists. It's not just that part of the story where, you know, there's the weak and the shame and the hurt and the pain. There's also the brilliance and the resilience and right? Yeah. And so, just reflecting on that and also focusing on what actually happened to break down that power that we had, that sense of community that we had. If we discuss that more, we'll know why we are where we are today.
So I mean, this reminds me of what you said about, so you have 13 that gets, you know, the Polaris, and you said to me, like, this was an album that was critical of the system that got recognized by the system. And then you have this record, which is all about trying to figure out where value comes from or addressing through facts the realities that Black people have faced historically in Canada that maybe have been swept under the rug under Canadian niceness or by looking at the United States. That this record is the first record you get nominated for a Juno for.
Yeah. I mean, and with Stock Exchange, I think there was a little bit more topics than just
of course.
That,
no,
right?
You're right.
But yes, but you're right. It's weird because I live in a world that tells me you shouldn't talk about that. But then I do, and it's like I'm one of these few people that people are like, wow, I've never thought about it like that. And it's an odd thing because I live in a world where that's not normalized, but then in my world it's normalized because of what I do. So it reminds me that maybe I'm occupying a space that I have to continue to occupy so that other people do feel more comfortable knowing they can discuss these things. You know, positivity comes from these conversations and actually having that understanding, because then people can feel a better sense of community, even if they're not a part of the same community that you are. They can be a part of a different community in a different way. And, you know, I just think understanding does can be the foundation for some change. If you don't understand, like people often, shun what they don't get or what they're not familiar with. And so to continue to create that familiarity, maybe more musicians will not feel that feeling of, I can't talk about that topic. That's going to affect me negatively. And maybe realize, no, like actually I can do that and I can go into any topic and, well, look at that artist. They were recognized for talking their truth, so I can do it too. And yeah, I think we need to change that narrative of silencing ourselves. I definitely did that a lot growing up.
Where were you when the Juno nomination came in?
I was at an Airbnb. Actually, I was doing a little thing with Flow, the radio station, for a week, and so it's interesting. I was with Kirk Diamond at the radio station, and he was also nominated, but we didn't know that then, and so we were like, let's go home and see. And I was so nervous because I was like, I had forgotten that it was even happening, but then it was all the rave that morning. Everyone was talking about it, so it kind of put me in this like anxious place of like, wow, everybody was like, make sure you watch and see if and I don't know. I didn't think anything specific was gonna happen. It was a weird year. It was weird to know how Stock Exchange was received. It was hard to know how, it impacted people because I wasn't performing it the way I'd wanted to.
Yeah.
So
you were looking at numbers on the screen.
Right.
Yeah, I know. And trying not to look at numbers on the screen.
Yeah, that weird
you're doing both
balance.
things at the same time.
So to be nominated, I was very happy.
What did you do? Did you celebrate?
No, because I was just at the Airbnb by myself. But like I got the text from the family and I was like, we'll talk about it in the week. We eventually went out for Chinese food and that was fun and tremendous. That was tremendous.
And it's exciting because it's happening in Toronto, just down the road from you,
Yeah, it was, I don't know, I find sometimes it's hard for me to process these things. It takes a minute. Like, I know I won the Polaris, but like, did I? I'm still like, it's weird.
Hold on. Yeah, no, you did. I just checked. Yeah, no, you're right.
It's hard to fathom, right?
Yeah.
And like, it's interesting. I think it's easier to process something that happens to somebody else than when it happens to you. Like, I know it happened, but it kind of just feels like a blur.
Yeah.
And the Junos, getting that nomination kind of felt like that too. It's always other people that remind me, you were nominated, that's so exciting. But it's just like another step in like the work that I'm doing. And on one hand, it's so amazing to have that step and be able to look back and say, wow, like that acknowledgement happened. But at the same time, it's like, it also is that pressure of like, what are you gonna do next? So I'm already thinking, what am I gonna do next?
Not work at Long McQuade.
Visit. I can only visit.
You're gonna
at this
visit your
point.
visit.
Yeah.
Hey, congratulations on everything.
Thank you so much.
Nice to hang out with you.
You too.